Cultural differences are bound to arise when immigrants arrive to start a new life in a society very different from that in which they grew up. And Chinese immigrants to the United States are no exception, especially those from perhaps less educated or remote areas of the country. But when those cultural differences clash with the legal norms of the new host country, and particularly in the area of raising children, the results can be tragic. A recent interview discussing this topic in the mainland Chinese press has become a hot topic, both in the mainstream media and online. State-owned news agency China News Service reprinted an article which is originally in the China-US press. That's a Chinese language newspaper in the United States and a website in the United States. It carried an interview with Jianghua. Now, this is a family coordinator with the New York-based Chinese-American Planning Council. He discussed the dilemmas faced by some Chinese parents when the way that they raise their children in the US came into conflict with norms there. Lee referred to an incident in which he said a Chinese-American man was actually shot dead by police after social services tried to take away his daughters. The police had been alerted, along with child welfare services, and a standoff had resulted in which the father was shot dead. Lee also referred to very different attitudes to corporal punishment and even some Chinese traditional medical practices that might be considered abuse in other societies. Well, to find out what Chinese net users have to say about this rather complicated issue, let's cross over now to our researcher Esther Deng in the newsroom. Now, Esther, as I mentioned, this story has received wide coverage here, but there seems to be some confusion. For one thing, there are a lot of questions about the shooting incident that Lee mentioned. What's being said about that?
Well, I need to point out first that many Chinese media carried this story under a rather misleading headline. For example, China News Service ran with a Chinese father shot to death in the U.S. for battling for his 10-year-old daughter. And this led many readers to believe this happened recently. In fact, net users who searched into it a bit found an incident like this did happen, but back in 2001. And it was a lot more complicated as many of the details were different to the story told by Jianghua. But whatever about the exact circumstances, the issue of different views of how to raise children has certainly ignited heated discussion in the Chinese online community. This poster 亲子博客中心 has this to say. Most Chinese may think it's not a big deal to bath any child, but it's against the law in some countries and could lead to a fatal tragedy. While a poster called Su Jin has this insight. In China, parents tend to take care of everything for their children. They feel it's both their right and their obligation, or else it implies they don't love them. The problem is that these children have no awareness of the danger of potential sexual assaults. A girl who feels it's normal for her father to touch her body may fail to realize the danger of others touching them too. Well, Gu Yue Xuanzhu is one of those who feels traditional attitudes may have to change, at least when in a different society. I think Chinese parents could be more open-minded and learn from Americans' parenting habits, and in this way foster a more independent personality for their children.
Now, Esther, one problem that Li Jianghua referred to was when social welfare, child protection authorities working under American norms become involved with families operating really in a Chinese cultural setting. How do Chinese net users feel about the US laws in terms of child protection?
Well, many net users are surprised at just how strict and detailed the laws in the U.S. on child protection are. Li mentioned that medical workers, teaching staff, administrative and law enforcement personnel are all obligated to report suspected child abuse or negligence to the authorities. For many Chinese, this would seem like unwarranted interference. This poster, Xinlu Duwu, a Chinese person who has lived in the U.S. for nearly 20 years, has this to say. The story may still serve as a warning call to fresh Chinese immigrants to the U.S. After they arrive there, observing the local customs is just a basic requirement. It's extremely important to gain detailed knowledge of relevant regulations and laws. And another Chinese U.S. resident, Lao Haigui, claims personal knowledge of another incident involving father and daughter. In the Chinese community where I live, a father was arrested for staying in the same room alone with his 7-year-old daughter. But most Chinese users actually welcome strict rules in the child protection law. 70年租客 says A well-written law ensures that the whole of society is aware of safeguarding children's happiness. But I also have to say that based on the story told by Li Jianghua, a number of net users have complaints about just how such laws should be implemented. This poster, Mu Shan Qianfeng, says, I applaud the strict law on child protection, but the brutality of law enforcement is quite inappropriate for this case.
Right. Well, as we pointed out, there is some doubt and confusion about that. But what about the broader picture of cultural differences between Chinese and American views in terms, particularly of raising children?
Well, most net users agree that there are problems which can't be ignored. Qiao Lei on Sina.com has a say. Ignorance of American society's customs and the children's law may lead to Chinese immigrants losing custody of their child, often for reasons that benefit them. There are two main problems. One is the traditional Chinese concept that corporal punishment makes a better person, while this is considered child abuse there. Another is overspoiled children, which can mean parents innocently ignore the boundaries of gender and age, and this can lead to suspicions of sexual abuse. And Aileen Gao on Weibo.com has another important point to add. Chinese parents have difficulty with the concept of children's privacy when they are growing up. And Han Pingwo on 163.com gives an example mentioned by a number of posters. The Chinese movie called The Guasha Treatments sparked a huge response because it perfectly expresses the huge cultural difference between East and West. And just to explain, Guasha is a traditional Chinese spa or folk medicine treatment. It involves scraping the skin with a stone or coin. It's very common in China, but leaves rather horrific-looking bruises and welts for a few days. The film tells of a Chinese grandfather who visits his children settled in the U.S. and treats his grandson's fever with guasha. The authorities, however, mistake the traditional Chinese medical treatment for child abuse, and the family goes through hell after the child is taken away from them. Finally, I will finish with a slightly more optimistic take on this issue from another poster who also cites this film. The conflicts shown by this film are the epitome of various cultural conflicts between East and the West. This will not go away every time soon because they are based on differences of thought and perception are formed over thousands of years. But the two cultures can gradually achieve some sort of mutual adaptation as long as there is a continuous effort to deepen and improve interaction and communication.
Okay, thanks for that, Esther. And that was China Tech researcher Esther Dong with some online reaction and discussion on the cultural differences between immigrants when they move to a new country such as the United States, and how those can sometimes present real difficulties for parents particularly.